I want to show you a few things that were updated and changed in the stocks workspaces for stock and options traders. What we have here is the ST Radar Stocks Daily Workspace. Yes, the one with a white background, in case there was any doubt about that. Let me just show you real briefly the ones we have there. Open Workspace. We have a day trading workspace which defaults to 10 minutes. We have a swing trading workspace that defaults to 60 minutes. We have a daily workspace that uses daily intervals, and a weekly workspace that uses weekly intervals. And when I refer to the intervals here, day or 10-minute swing, daily and weekly, I mean what we scan for in radar screen, and also then what is the matching primary entry chart. So in this daily workspace, we are scanning for daily simple rows in a radar screen, and this daily chart here is the primary chart. The 60-minute chart over here is the one we used to look inside each of these bars to get an idea of are there any zones internally, and to kind of verify what we see on the daily chart. The weekly chart here down here is the high time frame chart, which is fixed weekly, and then we have an extra high time, or the next higher time frame over here in the monthly. I do not want to give a full course in how to use these ST Radar Stocks workspaces at this time, because I gave one not too long ago. If you go to the SD Zones membership page, let me just pull that up for you again. Here it is. And if you scroll down to the trading videos from May, you will see there is one, part 7, which is stocks and options, daily and swing, which really covers these workspaces in quite some detail. If you are relatively new to using these workspaces, this would be a place to start to get your feet wet with how to use them. All of the stocks workspaces have similar layouts, with a radar screen containing 2 tabs, one for the list of S&P 500 stocks and another with a list of ETFs. So as you can imagine, that adds up. That becomes almost 600 different symbols in this particular radar screen. TradeStation has a physical limit of 1,000 symbols. That's the most you can squeeze into a radar screen window. As a matter of fact, that's the most you can have in all of your open radar screens at the same time, which is one reason why you don't want to have multiple SD Radar Stocks workspaces open at the same time. But this also means that we can simply forget about having multiple intervals for each symbol, for each stock in these stocks workspaces. The way we have it in futures workspaces is simply would not only not be feasible, it's just simply physically impossible to squeeze them into these radar screens. And so that wonderful new high time frame link feature, which I showed you in the futures workspaces, really serves no function in the stocks workspaces, because the high time frame chart always has the same interval in a given workspace. In the daily workspace with daily entry charts, it's always weekly high time frame charts. In the swing workspace with 60-minute entry chart, it is always daily high time frame chart, and so forth. So you stock and options traders who are using the SD Radar Stocks workspaces can simply keep using them without major changes, and that is a good thing, because you've been doing very, very well. One change that has been made is that beta has been added back into the radar screen. It used to be there many years ago, and for some reason we took it out. It's now back in on request, and that makes perfect sense, because when you're evaluating in the radar screen before even looking at a chart whether you want to consider these stocks, it is important for you to consider beta as well as the relative performance in the stock and its IV and so forth. And that's really the whole purpose with this very rich radar screen we have in the stocks workspaces, that you can do a lot of the pre-selection of stocks in the radar screen before you actually start digging into the charts. As usual, I updated the S&P 500 list of stocks, removed the ones they'd taken out, added the ones they'd added. Their last update was in November I was a little surprised by some of the ones they'd added, such as, let's see, Solstice here, which has very little history. No daily zones yet, and certainly no weekly or monthly zones. Although there is just enough data for 60-minute zones. I also noticed, of course, there's not nearly enough data for IV yet, which requires a whole year of history. There were another few ones that were also very thin. I left them in here, so even though they may not be relevant candidates for a long time in the daily workspace, they may still have some relevance in the swing workspace, 60-minute, or the day trading workspace, 10-minute. And either way, it's not my job to tell the S&P whom to add to their list. So they're in there. If you don't want to have them in there, you just take them out. Just hit, you click them and hit the delete key, and they'll be gone. So you can do that as you like. I wanted to briefly show you the SD Radar Stocks workspace as well, so you know how it's different from the daily workspace. And of course, the main difference is that in Radar Screen, we scan for 60-minute zones rather than daily zones, and similarly in the primary entry chart up here, we scan for, obviously, or we show 60-minute zones rather than daily zones. That in turn means that the high time frame chart here is now the daily chart, and the next high time frame chart is now the weekly chart. This was the weekly and the monthly in the daily workspace, right? So everything is just raised up one level. Similarly, also the look inside chart we have over to the left, which was 60-minute on the daily workspace, is 50-minute on this one. Again, it's not rocket science. One thing I do want to point out is there's a difference in Radar Screen as far as the columns available there. We still have the S&P relative change over the last 4 weeks here. We still have the newly added beta column, and of course we still have SD zones with supply and demand and proximity columns, but we do not have IV and IV percentile shown over here. I wish I could do that, but in TradeStation, IV and IV percentile, the information, the data fields that those are based on, is only available on daily intervals and higher. So I can only show that in Radar Screen on in the daily workspace and the weekly workspace, not in the swing 60-minute and the day trading 10-minute workspaces. As for how you use this swing workspace to look for trade setups, that is of course very similar to the daily workspace, except here we now look for 60-minute supply and demand zones instead of daily supply and demand zones. But just to recap, you do look for highlighted supply and demand cells in the Radar Screen, either the yellow ones, which are ones that are within proximity, which in this workspace, let me show you, the swing workspace is set to 2 hours. So anything that's estimated that could reach a zone within 2 hours will be highlighted yellow. In the daily workspace, it's 6.5 hours, 6.5 being one trading day, one stock session. But here we use 2 hours. So for example, if we look at this Dow as a simple zone down here, supply zone, that's an hour and 45 minutes away, estimated again. One thing you want to consider right away is, instead of just clicking at it right away, often you'll look at it and say, listen, do you really want to trade a 0.78 beta stock? Right? You see what I mean? So is that what you're looking for? Okay, it is a supply zone, and it has been weaker, but not really weaker than the S&P over the last 4 weeks. So is it really something you want to consider? I would say for me, not, and I would just move on based on that, right? So that's how you use the beta column. That's how you use the Radar Screen without even having to go look at a chart. But for the heck of it, and just for educational purposes, let's just click on this Dow chart anyway and see what it looks like. And while we're waiting for the minute data to arrive, we'll notice right away that, boy, Dow has been weak. I mean, over many weeks, right? And actually over a couple of years, it's just been down. They just could not find a bit. So that is a stock where, I mean, you by and large, you do want to look for supply zone, all else being equal, when it's a weak stock. That said, it actually has come down and is leveling off a little bit. So the last few weeks, it seems to not pick up further downward speed, and that is reflected also on this daily chart down here. We see that we did form a new supply zone up here. We came down, but then we came to this demand zone that so far is holding price but not propelling it all the way up to the opposing supply zone. So it is conceivable that it may want to go lower. But that said, even though this is a fairly nice supply zone right here, particularly if we have a breakdown here, that will be a breakdown schmack into this demand zone right down here, which means, according to the rules, I could not short this regardless. So even outside of the considerations I gave you before of low beta and all of that, and outside the other aspects of this chart, I would say this is not a trade for me. Now, I do not want to spend a lot of time showing more examples of trade finding here, because that is covered in that training video from May, but I think you get the idea.